We were just walking through the woods when my daughter froze and whispered, "Daddy, do you hear that?" At first it was only wind and birds, but then I heard it too, a faint human voice, begging for help. We pushed through the trees, and in a small clearing, I saw her, half buried in the dirt, clawing at the ground with terror in her eyes. The woods had become their sanctuary, a place where silence and memory blended into something almost sacred. For 2 years, ever since Emily's passing, Mark had brought his daughter Chloe here every weekend. At first, the walks had been quiet, the girl holding his hand with a grip so tight it felt like she feared the trees themselves might steal him away. But over time, as weeks turned into months, she had begun to skip ahead of him, pointing out wildflowers or crouching to examine beetles that darted across the trail. On this afternoon, the sun filtered through the canopy in golden streams. Chloe bounded ahead in her favorite pink hoodie, the one with a unicorn stitched on the front, her brown ponytail bouncing behind her. Every few steps, she glanced back to make sure her father was close, her small smile showing the comfort of routine. "Daddy, look at this rock. It sparkles," she called, crouching beside a piece of quartz that caught the light. Mark smiled, slowing his pace. "That's a good find, kiddo. You've got an eye for treasure." He carried a small backpack slung over one shoulder, more out of habit than need. Inside were a thermos of water, a flashlight, and the first aid kit Emily used to insist on packing whenever they went camping. Mark kept bringing it, even now, though they rarely needed it. It reminded him of her insistence on preparedness, her steady voice that used to balance his impulsive nature. As they walked, the woods spoke their usual language, the whisper of wind high above, the sharp call of a jay hidden in branches, the faint trickle of water from a stream further downhill. Mark breathed deeply, letting the earthy scent of damp leaves ground him. These sounds and smells had become their therapy, a way to stitch their grief into something survivable. Chloe ran a few steps ahead and then stopped suddenly. She tilted her head, her expression changing from playfulness to concentration. "Daddy," she said, her voice quieter this time. "What's that sound?" Mark paused mid-step, listening. At first, all he heard were the familiar notes of the forest song. His mind flicked automatically to possibilities, a rustle of deer moving through brush, the scrape of branches rubbing in the wind. He was about to reassure her when he caught it too. Faint, almost smothered, yet undeniably human. A voice, a plea. He froze, the hair on his arms rising. Someone out there was calling for help. Chloe's eyes widened as she clutched her father's sleeve. "Did you hear it too?" Mark nodded slowly, his heartbeat shifting from calm to alert. "Yeah," he murmured, scanning the trees as though they might part to show him the source. He squeezed Chloe's hand gently, anchoring them both. "Stay close to me, sweetheart." He didn't know yet what waited beyond the trail, but instinct told him their quiet afternoon had just changed forever. The forest had always felt safe to Mark, a place where sorrow could be released into the trees and the silence stitched his heart back together. But now, that fragile piece fractured under the weight of a voice carried faintly on the wind. "Help! Please, someone help me." The words were barely more than a whisper, yet they cut through the woods like a siren. Mark's muscles tensed immediately. Years on construction sites had trained him to recognize urgency. One wrong sound could mean someone pinned, bleeding, or worse. He turned his head toward the direction the voice had come from, his pulse quickening. Chloe's fingers tightened around his hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "is somebody out there?" He crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. Her brown eyes, wide with both fear and curiosity, searched his face for reassurance. He forced calm into his expression even as his stomach twisted. "Yes, baby. It sounds like someone needs help." She bit her lip, considering. What if it's a bad person? Mark didn't dismiss the question. She was smart, too aware for her age, shaped by the loss of her mother. "That's why you have to stay close to me. You don't let go of my hand unless I tell you." "Understand." Chloe nodded solemnly, her earlier playfulness gone, replaced by the seriousness that sometimes startled him. She had Emily's quiet strength, an ability to face hard truths without looking away. He rose and tugged her gently off the trail, the branches snapping back against his jacket as they pushed into undergrowth. The voice came again, fainter this time, broken by sobs. Mark's ears strained, triangulating direction the way he would locate a creaking beam or shifting scaffolding on a job site. Each step away from the main path made him weigh two competing instincts: protect his daughter at all costs and honor the call for help that no decent man could ignore. He glanced down at Chloe, who gripped his hand with small but steady fingers. "Daddy," she said softly, "Mom would want us to help, right?" The words hit him like a blow. Emily's voice echoed in memory. Her insistence that compassion was never optional, that strength meant using what you had for others. He squeezed Chloe's hand. "Yes, sweetheart." She would. Branches scratched his arms as they pushed deeper into the woods. The sound grew clearer now, desperation threading every syllable. "Please. I can't, someone." Mark's jaw tightened. Whoever it was, they weren't just lost or injured. That was the voice of someone staring at death. He felt Chloe stumble slightly on the uneven ground and scooped her up, carrying her the last few yards until the trees thinned into a small clearing. And there, half hidden by dirt and shadow, was the sight that froze both father and daughter where they stood. The clearing was small, ringed by young oaks and patches of tangled underbrush, but what lay at its center made Mark's stomach drop. A woman, her body half submerged in dirt, struggled weakly. Her legs and torso were buried as though the earth itself had tried to claim her, but her arms clawed frantically at the soil, fingernails packed with mud. Blonde hair, streaked and matted, clung to her face. Her suit, once crisp and professional, was ripped and filthy, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin. Chloe gasped and froze beside him. Her small hand slipped from his, her eyes wide with the kind of fear a child shouldn't have to carry. Mark dropped to one knee instantly, pulling her close against his side. "It's okay," he whispered quickly, though the sight in front of them screamed otherwise. The woman's head turned toward them, eyes wide with terror, and she cried out hoarsely, "Please, please help me." Her voice cracked, broken from hours, maybe more, of calling into the wilderness. Mark's instincts kicked in. He set his jaw, scanning the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had seen collapsed scaffolding and trench cave-ins. This wasn't an accident. Someone had forced her here, shoveled dirt over her body, and left her alive but trapped. It was deliberate, cruel. "Chloe," he said firmly, his voice low but steady, "listen to me. You need to go back to the trail. Do you remember the markers we passed? Find the first hiker you see and tell them it's a medical emergency in section C4. Say that exactly. Can you do that?" She looked at him, her lower lip trembling. "What about you? I'll stay here and keep her safe. But she needs help fast. You're the fastest way to get it. And remember, section C4, medical emergency. Say it twice if you have to." Chloe swallowed hard, nodded, and repeated, "Section C4, medical emergency." She glanced at the woman, her eyes softening despite her fear, then darted off into the trees. The sound of her running faded quickly. Mark turned back to the woman and knelt beside her. "I've got you," he said, his voice calmer than he felt. He brushed away clumps of earth from her chest, careful not to press on her ribs. "You're going to be okay." She flinched at his touch, her breath ragged. "I can't feel my legs," she gasped. "Whoever did this, they said they'd come back. Please, don't leave me." Mark's throat tightened. He didn't know if the attackers were nearby, but the urgency in her voice told him there wasn't time to hesitate. His hands, calloused from years of labor, dug quickly but carefully at the soil around her, loosening the packed dirt. Each scoop felt like prying her from death's grip. Her eyes fixed on him, wide and desperate, clinging to the sight of another human being who hadn't abandoned her. For the first time since Emily's death, Mark felt the full weight of what it meant to be the only thing standing between life and loss. Mark worked methodically, loosening dirt with his hands and brushing it away from her chest and ribs. Years of hauling bricks, shoveling trenches, and digging footings had given him both strength and control. Every motion was measured, careful not to collapse more soil onto her. The woman groaned as feeling began to return to parts of her body. Pain etched across her features. "What's your name?" Mark asked, needing to keep her conscious, needing her mind engaged while his hands did the work. Her lips trembled before she found the strength to answer. "Victoria. Victoria Sterling." The name landed like a hammer blow. Mark's eyes flicked up, studying her face beneath the layers of dirt and fear. He had seen that face before, not in person, but in newspapers and local broadcasts. Sterling Enterprises. The Riverside Development Project. The luxury condos that had bulldozed entire neighborhoods and left working families scrambling. He remembered sitting at the Union Hall, listening to men he'd worked alongside, men who had poured sweat into the city for decades, talk about how their parents lost homes their grandparents had built. He remembered his friend Miguel, breaking down because the house his family had lived in for 3 generations had been bought out and demolished. All of it tied to the woman now gasping under his hands. His digging slowed for half a second, the weight of recognition tightening his chest. Of all the people he and Chloe could stumble upon in the woods, it had to be her. Victoria must have seen something flicker in his expression because she whispered, You know who I am, don't you?" Mark didn't answer right away. He forced his hands to keep moving, pushing away clods of earth. "Doesn't matter," he said finally, his voice low. "It does," she rasped. "The men who attacked me, they knew who I was too. They said this was punishment, a lesson for taking what wasn't mine." Mark's jaw clenched. The Riverside Project. It had left scars in his own community, wounds that still hadn't healed. And here she was, facing retribution in the cruelest way imaginable. For a heartbeat, a dangerous thought flashed through his mind. Some people would call this justice. But then he felt Emily's voice again, the way she used to steady him when bitterness threatened to take root. "Revenge isn't justice, Mark. Don't let anger decide for you." He exhaled sharply, clearing the thought. Whatever she had done in boardrooms and contracts, no human being deserved to be left to die in a shallow grave. "Victoria," he said firmly, meeting her fearful eyes, "this isn't justice. Not like this. Nobody deserves this." His voice softened as he added, "And my little girl is watching how I handle this. So I'm going to get you out." Her eyes shimmered with tears, confusion and relief mingling. She studied him as though trying to understand how someone who had reason to hate her could still choose compassion. Mark pressed his hands deeper into the soil, his decision made. Whatever history existed between her name and his world, right now there was only one truth. She was a life in danger, and he wasn't about to let his daughter see him turn away. Mark's hands were caked with dirt now, the creases of his knuckles packed with earth as he dug carefully around her hips and thighs. Every time she winced, he slowed, adjusting the angle, mindful not to cause more pain. He worked in silence for a few moments, listening for the rustle of footsteps, worried her attackers might return, but the forest held only the quiet rhythm of birds and wind. Victoria broke the silence first, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Why are you helping me?" Mark didn't look up, focusing on clearing soil from around her legs. "Because you need it," he said simply. "That's not what I mean." She coughed, struggling for breath. "You must know who I am. What I've done. Sterling Enterprises." "I know." Mark cut in, his tone even but firm. He remembered too well the faces of neighbors who'd packed their lives into cardboard boxes because of her company's projects. He paused, sat back on his heels, and met her gaze. "But that doesn't change this moment. Right now, you're a person in danger. That's all that matters." Her eyes searched his face, almost disbelieving. "But your community, your friends. My company hurt them." Mark exhaled slowly, glancing in the direction Chloe had run. His daughter's small figure wasn't visible, but he imagined her listening ears, her sharp memory. "My little girl is out there, hearing how I respond," he said quietly. "If she grows up thinking we only help the people we like, then I've failed her. I want her to see that compassion isn't a reward. It's the right thing to do." Victoria's throat tightened, emotion welling in her chest. In her world, favors came with contracts, conditions, and leverage. No one gave without expecting something back. Yet here was a man with dirt under his fingernails, a widowed father raising a child alone, offering help with no strings. She blinked, fighting tears. "I don't understand you." "You don't have to," Mark said, returning to his work. "You just have to hold on until help arrives." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the scrape of his hands moving earth. Victoria lay still, her chest rising and falling unevenly, but her mind raced. She had always believed survival meant outmaneuvering competitors, protecting assets, controlling outcomes. Yet lying half-buried, entirely dependent on this stranger's choice, she realized how powerless she truly was, and how foreign genuine kindness felt. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Your daughter, she's lucky to have you." Mark stopped, his throat tightening. He swallowed hard, pressing back the sudden ache of memory. Emily's laugh. Emily's voice telling him the same thing. He gave a short nod, then forced himself back into motion. No, he murmured, more to himself than to her. I'm the lucky one. Mark's hands dug faster now, each movement freeing more of her legs. He could feel the soil loosening, could see patches of pale skin beneath the grime. Every grunt of effort brought her closer to release. He paused only to steady her breathing, murmuring reassurances while his eyes swept the tree line for any sign of danger. Victoria's head lolled back for a moment. Then she forced her eyes open, fixing them on him. There was something in her expression that went beyond fear, something heavier, like the weight of memory pressing down on her. "Mark," she whispered, her voice ragged. He frowned. "How do you know my name?" "Your daughter," she rasped, managing a faint smile. "She called it when you sent her for help." He nodded once, already turning back to the soil. "Don't waste your energy talking." But she kept going, her voice threaded with urgency. "No, you need to hear this." Mark stilled, his hands hovering over the ground. He looked at her, dirt streaking his forearms, sweat trickling down his temple. "The Riverside Project," she said haltingly. "The one that displaced so many families. I signed off on it. I thought it was progress, new growth, new profits. But for months, I've been haunted by the faces of the people who lost everything. I pushed the guilt aside, telling myself it was business. Necessary. But today, her eyes brimmed with tears. Being here, helpless, terrified, I finally understand what I did to them. The powerlessness, the despair." Her chest hitched as she fought for breath. "It's not just numbers in a report. It's people, families, children." Her voice cracked. "I caused that. And now I know what it feels like." Mark stared at her, his jaw tight. A part of him wanted to tell her she was right, that she had destroyed lives. But another part recognized that this wasn't the moment for judgment. It was the moment for survival. "Victoria," he said firmly, his voice steady but not unkind. "You can reckon with those choices later. Right now, you need to stay alive. That's the only thing that matters." She blinked, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. "But I need you to know I see it now. I see what I've done." Mark leaned closer, his voice lowering. "Then hold on to that. Let it change you. But don't think for a second that I'm digging you out for redemption. I'm doing it because no one deserves to die like this. Not even you." For a long moment, their eyes locked, hers filled with shame and awakening, his with weary resolve. In that exchange, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but the seed of accountability taking root in soil far deeper than the grave she had been left in. Mark dug harder, the sound of his labored breathing mixing with the rustle of disturbed earth. He wasn't just freeing her body from the ground. He was unearthing a truth she could no longer bury. Mark had just freed the last mound of packed earth from around her legs when Victoria let out a sharp cry. Circulation was returning, pain riding with it like fire coursing through her body. He steadied her with one arm behind her shoulders, lowering her carefully against the trunk of a nearby oak. "Easy," he murmured. "Breathe. Let your body catch up." She clenched her jaw, tears streaking down her face. For the first time since he found her, she wasn't clawing at the dirt or begging for help. She was simply breathing, shaky but alive. In the distance, Mark heard voices calling through the trees. Footsteps, branches snapping. Relief flickered across his face. Chloe had done exactly what he asked. Help was on its way. Victoria's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Mark, before they get here, listen to me." Her voice trembled, but there was an urgency in it that made him pause. "What is it?" She drew in a ragged breath. "What you've done today, saving me. Even though you had every reason to walk away, it's changed me. I want you to know that. I can't undo the damage my company has caused, but I can choose differently from here on." Her eyes locked onto his, raw and searching. "I want to make things right. Not just with words, but with action." Mark studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He saw sincerity, but also desperation, the realization of how close she had come to never having another chance. "Victoria," he said slowly, "if you mean that, then you need to understand something. Good intentions won't fix what's been broken. You'll have to listen to the people you hurt. You'll have to face them, not hide behind lawyers and PR teams. Real change isn't a press release, it's hard work." Her grip on his wrist tightened. Then I'll do the work." Before he could reply, the clearing filled with movement. Two paramedics rushed forward with medical bags, followed by a pair of officers. And there, breathless, her cheeks flushed from running, was Chloe. She darted straight to Mark, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy, I found them. They came." Her small body trembled against him, pride and fear tangled in her voice. Mark hugged her close, one hand on the back of her head. "You did perfect, sweetheart." The medics knelt beside Victoria, checking her vitals and preparing a stretcher. One of the officers crouched near Mark. "You the one who found her?" Mark gave a short nod. "We were hiking. Heard her calling." He kept his voice even, not inviting questions. As they lifted Victoria carefully onto the stretcher, she turned her head, her eyes finding his one more time. There was no grandeur in her expression, only a raw, unspoken promise. Mark gave her a steady look in return, part warning, part hope. Whether she meant her words or not, the next chapter was hers to write. The press conference was nothing like the glossy unveilings Sterling Enterprises had staged in the past. No velvet curtains, no staged applause, no glass towers on display behind polished screens. Instead, a modest community center bustled with neighbors, reporters, and families whose lives had once been uprooted by corporate expansion. The smell of coffee and fresh paint lingered in the air, a reminder that the building itself had only recently been renovated with local labor. At the podium stood Victoria Sterling, her posture still carrying the confidence of a CEO, but her voice different now. Softer, grounded. "Today," she said, glancing down at her notes before lifting her gaze to the crowd, "we begin something new, the Sterling Community Foundation. Its mission is simple: to support families displaced by development, to provide housing assistance and job training, and to rebuild trust where we once caused harm." Mark watched from the side of the room, Chloe's hand tucked into his. He wore no suit, only a clean work shirt with rolled sleeves, the same way he always did. He wasn't here for spectacle. He was here because Victoria had followed through on her words in the forest. When she asked him to join the foundation as director of community outreach, he had hesitated, wary of being used as a symbol. But in every meeting, in every late-night phone call, he'd seen her determination to do more than save face. She wanted to change. As Victoria continued her speech, her eyes swept across the room and landed on him. For a moment, the noise faded, and there was only the memory of dirt under fingernails and whispered confessions in the woods. She gave the smallest nod, a silent acknowledgement of the promise she was keeping. The first project, she explained, would be the construction of affordable housing on the very land where the riverside development had stood. Families who had lost homes would have a chance to return, not as tenants of luxury condos, but as members of a neighborhood built for them. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed into conversations and handshakes, Chloe skipped down the hallway, peeking into rooms where volunteers sorted supplies. Staff members smiled at her, some calling her the foundation's mascot. Mark chuckled softly. Her presence reminded everyone why this work mattered, why rebuilding wasn't just about structures, but about the children who would inherit them. Victoria approached quietly, her steps slower than before, humility tempering her once commanding stride. "How does it feel?" she asked Mark, gesturing toward the families gathering near the sign-up tables. He considered the question, his eyes tracing the hopeful faces. "Feels like the first beam going up on a long build. Strong, but only the beginning." She nodded, her expression serious. "Then we'll keep building." Mark didn't smile, but something eased in his chest. The woman he had pulled from the earth wasn't the same woman standing beside him now. And perhaps he wasn't the same man either. As Chloe came running back to grab his hand, Mark squeezed it gently. He had once thought the most important structures he could build were made of concrete and steel. But watching her grin up at him, and seeing Victoria's earnest resolve, he realized the truest work was rebuilding dignity, trust, and hope. And in that shared purpose, born from a desperate cry in the woods, something unlikely but undeniably good had begun.